I remember the first vintage lens that I found at a market. I paid the equivalent of around £5 for a Pentax zoom lens, which I went on to adapt to my mirrorless camera. And that experience opened my eyes to the fact that some lenses possess an inherent quality that allows one to render images that are densely packed in color and quite stark in contrast, more so than other lenses. And it was this experience that finally allowed me to understand the concept of a clinical image, a lens that produces a clinical image. My modern lenses possess these clinical characteristics. This cheap old Pentax zoom did not possess that characteristic, and I finally understood the concept of a lens with character. Fast forward a few years and I have a decent collection of vintage lenses. So let's briefly discuss this one over here. My Nikon H Auto 50mm f2. This one came attached to my Nikon f2 when I bought it, but it no longer lives on my Nikon f2. The Nikon f2 lives with the 50mm f1.4. This one I've primarily used on my mirrorless cameras adapted with an adapter. I do plan on comparing the two lenses because I'd like to make sure that I'm using the lens with the best characteristics. And I'm not referring to how fast it is, but image render characteristics such as contrast and density of color. You'll hear me talk a lot about that. You've heard me talk a lot about that in my videos, density in color and contrast, particularly density in color. Once I figure out which of those two lenses, the 1.4 of the two, I prefer, that's going to be the one that lives on my Nikon f2. I've digressed. Now, this will not be a full, comprehensive, full-bodied or well-rounded review of my Nikon 50mm f2. This is going to be a brief rundown of my experience taking this lens to the aquarium. And I did this adapted to my LUMIX S5. And adapting this to a mirrorless camera means no autofocus, and I don't think I need to elaborate on that further, but I most certainly will because it was quite significant in my shooting experience. Usually when I adapt a vintage lens to my LUMIX S5, the focus peaking features are quite good. The focus peaking is quite sensitive, and it makes it quite easy to shoot manual focus with my vintage lenses. But that wasn't the case with my Nikon H 50mm f2. I found that the LUMIX S5 was slightly less sensitive and I found it quite difficult to hit focus. But this doesn't mean that none of my shots were in focus. Actually, a quite large amount of them were in focus, and I feel that quite a lot of them came out quite beautifully. There's something quite exciting about this lens's ability to render color and contrast, and many of my images I'd say were pretty great straight out of camera. So I was quite pleased with that aspect of it all. But next time I go to the aquarium, I will be packing in my S5 with its kit lens so that I can use autofocus, and then also I'll adapt or attach a circular polarizing filter so that I can shoot through the glass at the aquarium. It'll just make things much easier. One thing that I am picking up on through my vintage lens experiments, and I'm going to read this off the screen, is that they tend to pull me away from my artistic function. The moment becomes more about whether I am hitting focus or not, and I need to keep that in mind this year as I aim to develop on and work on my art rather than worry about the volume of photos that I'm producing. So that is something I do need to keep in mind when I'm playing with my vintage lenses. I really do need to just take out my kit lens, my standard system, get out there and think more about what my project intentions are rather than am I hitting focus. But despite all that, I am happy with a fair amount of the images that I got. Particularly, I enjoyed trying to capture video of the jellyfish. It was quite dreamy to be in that dark room with the jellyfish that are lit in specific ways. So I do hope, and you'll be seeing it on video right now if it did work out, but I do hope that they came out as cool as I envisioned when I was filming. Let's take a look at some photos. Ragged-tooth shark. So I think 3 of the ragged-tooth sharks ragged teeth sharks. The ragged tooth sharks are rescues. This one tooth is ragged indeed. I sat for quite some time waiting to get those shots in focus. And I figured that if focus wasn't perfect, at least I'd be able to at least try present them in a more dramatic and punchy way to kind of detract from that. But fortunately, I didn't really need to do that. I think this is a gully shark or a hound shark. Beautiful eyes and a lovely shape. I didn't capture a photo of the gully shark and its slender form. Next time I go, I should actually try to do that. Maybe capture on video because it's quite a beautiful fish to look at. And this is a crazy, over-edited anemone. It wasn't as pink as that. I went quite heavy on this edit too. I managed to forgive myself for that, so I'm sure you can forgive me too. I think I ended up having too much fun when it came to the editing, probably because I was just so happy that not every shot was a complete failure. The thing is that when I take photos, when I'm out and about taking photos, I don't take a photo and look, take a photo and look. I just take the photos and I just end up getting surprised by what I see on the screen. I guess it keeps things exciting in my photography. Overall, I think it was a success of a day. First of all, it was a fun day. I hadn't been to the aquarium since I was a small child, so it was fun and I learned a lot. To top things off, I got some fun photos out of it, and the complete cherry on top was on the way home we stopped at a brewery where I ended up tasting one of the favorite beers, if not my favorite beer that I've tasted in the past few years. So that was overall a successful day. And I hope that you enjoyed the photos. I'll be sure to put together a more well-rounded review of this lens and some of the other lenses that I have. Check this out over here. I bought this as a display piece, but it's still working, so I will be putting some film in there. Samoka 35. Let's leave it at that, folks. Thanks so much for taking the time to be here. I do appreciate it. Don't forget to keep taking photos, keep making videos, take care of yourselves, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.